The private dining room on the 43rd floor of the Meridian Club smelled like cedar smoke and old money, the kind of place where the crystal was never touched by human hands until it was absolutely necessary, and the silence between sentences cost more per minute than most people made in a day. Calla Merritt had learned to move through rooms like this the way water moves through cracks, quietly, efficiently, without disturbing anything that didn't need to be disturbed. She carried 3 plates of duck, confit up her left arm and one in her right hand, her back straight, her face arranged into the pleasant blankness that the job required. She had been doing this for 2 years. She was good at it. What the men in that room didn't know, what they never bothered to wonder about, was that Calla had once sat in a lecture hall at Columbia University and understood every word her organic chemistry professor said before he finished saying it. She had been 3rd in her class when she left, not dropped out, left. There was a difference, even if the outcome looked the same from the outside. Her mother's dialysis didn't pay for itself. She set the plates down with a practiced hand and stepped back toward the wall, where servers were supposed to stand when the conversation was happening, and the food was cooling, and the men in the room needed to feel unwatched while being watched. There were 7 of them tonight. A private dinner for the partners of Aldridge Capital, celebrating something she hadn't been told and didn't need to know. She just needed to keep the water glasses full and stay out of the way. The man at the head of the table was named Everett Strom. She knew this because the reservation had been made in his name, because his assistant had called 3 times to confirm dietary restrictions, and because the general manager had personally briefed the floor staff that morning with the kind of nervous energy usually reserved for visiting heads of state. Strom was 61, silver-haired, and had the easy cruelty of a man who had never once in his adult life been told no by anyone who mattered. He was also, apparently, in a mood. "You know what I love about this room?" he was saying, leaning back in his chair with a glass of Chateau Petrus balanced between 2 fingers. "Nobody pretends. No theater. You walk in here, you're either worth talking to or you're not." He let his eyes slide sideways toward a younger man at the table, mid-30s, tight jaw, new enough to the partnership that he still had the look of someone trying to prove something. "Isn't that right, Whitfield?" The younger man smiled, the way people smile when they're not sure if something is funny or a test. Strom's gaze drifted further, caught on Calla as she lifted the empty bread basket from the table. "Even the staff knows it," he said, not unpleasantly. "The way you'd say it about furniture. Good help understands the room." Calla said nothing. She set the basket on her tray, made a mental note to bring the rosemary focaccia, and moved away from the table. She had heard worse. She had heard better. She had learned that the best thing to do with comments like that was to let them fall into the carpet and keep walking. But the evening was only beginning. The trouble started over the wine, not the bottle. The question. One of the partners, a soft-spoken man named Reuben, with a pocket square that cost more than Calla's monthly rent, had asked their sommelier, Jacques, to recommend something for the 2nd course. Jacques was excellent at his job. He presented 2 options, described them with appropriate flourish, and waited. Strom cut in before Reuben could respond. "What's the Margot situation?" he asked. Jacques, calm, professional, explained that the 96 Margot was still available, though he might recommend the 01 for this particular menu pairing. "I didn't ask for a recommendation," Strom said. "I asked what the situation was." There was a pause. Jacques absorbed it gracefully. "Of course, the 96 is available, Mr. Strom." "Then we'll have the 96. Calla watched this from near the service station, where she was adjusting the arrangement on the dessert tray and trying to look like she was thinking about nothing. She had noticed, over the past 2 years, that men like Strom didn't actually want the thing they were demanding. They wanted the asking. They wanted the half-second of hesitation in someone else's face that confirmed they had the power to cause it. The 96 Margot was decanted and poured, and for a while things settled. Conversation moved to returns and restructuring, and a deal in Singapore that seemed to be giving someone named Clifton. Not at this table. Apparently, just a name that kept coming up, a great deal of difficulty. Calla moved in and out, cleared plates, brought the second course, kept the water glasses full. It was during the lamb that Strom noticed the book. It wasn't supposed to be there. Calla knew that. She had been carrying it in the deep pocket of her apron all evening, a worn paperback copy of Principles of Biochemistry, the edition she had used at Columbia, its spine cracked in 3 places from how many times she'd read it. She had 30 minutes between her split shift that afternoon, and she'd been reviewing enzyme kinetics at the prep station when the dinner bell had pulled her away. She'd tucked the book into her apron without thinking, the way you tuck a phone away when someone calls your name. She didn't realize it had slipped partially out of her pocket until she was leaning over the table to clear Strom's bread plate, and she saw him looking at it with the particular expression of a man who has just noticed something amusing. "Is that a textbook?" he asked. She straightened, tucked the book back down. "I apologize, sir. It was unprofessional." "No, no." He said it the way people say no. No when they mean yes, stay. "I want to look at this. What is it? What are you reading?" "Just something personal. It won't happen again. Biochemistry." He had read the spine before she covered it. He turned to the table with the small, satisfied smile of a man who had found the evening's entertainment. "Our server is studying biochemistry." A few of the partners glanced over. Polite interest. Reuben, to his credit, looked faintly uncomfortable. "That's impressive," said the younger man, Whitfield, and he seemed to mean it. Strom looked at Whitfield the way a cat looks at something that has moved unexpectedly. Then he looked back at Calla. "Are you in school?" "Not currently," she said. "Were you?" She knew how this went. She had 2 choices, deflect and disappear, or answer and stay. Either way, she would be talked about for 30 seconds and then forgotten. "Columbia. Biochemistry. I left before finishing." The table absorbed this. Strom picked up his wineglass. "Columbia." He repeated the word in a tone that wasn't quite disbelief and wasn't quite respect, just the sound of a man turning something over to see what was underneath. "Why'd you leave?" "Family circumstances." "Family circumstances," he repeated, as if she'd said something charming. "Well, that's a shame." He looked at the table. "Bright girl, wrong choices." Calla said nothing. Although, Strom continued, tilting his glass slightly, warming to himself, "You have to wonder, don't you? Columbia, biochemistry, and this is where you end up." He gestured at the room, at the tray in her hands, at the bread basket, at all of it. Maybe it's not just circumstances. Some people think they're cut out for a certain life, and the world has a way of calibrating them. The table went quiet in the way tables go quiet when someone has said something that everyone knows is wrong, but nobody is going to say so out loud because the wrong person said it. Calla heard her own pulse for a moment. 2 years ago, she would have excused herself. A year ago, she might have smiled and nodded and retreated to the service station to spend the rest of the evening vibrating with something she had no name for. Tonight, she didn't know why tonight was different. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the fact that she had been at her mother's hospital appointment that morning and had sat for 45 minutes listening to a doctor explain kidneys with the slow, careful enunciation you use when you assume the person across from you doesn't know very much. Maybe it was just that she was 29 years old and she was tired of being calibrated. "With respect, Mr. Strom," she said, her voice perfectly even. The world didn't calibrate me. I made a choice, and I'd make it again. Silence. Strom's eyebrows rose slightly, not anger, something closer to delight. He had found the sharp edge he'd been poking at, and it had finally pushed back. A choice, he said. Good for you. He set down his glass. Defending the choice to leave Colombia to pour water for a living. Defending the choice to take care of my mother while she was sick, Calla said. The water pouring is just the part that pays for it. Reuben made a small sound that was not quite a cough. Strom studied her for a moment. She kept her face neutral, her tray level, her posture exactly where it was supposed to be. She wasn't afraid of him. That was the thing she realized, standing there. She wasn't afraid. All right, Strom said. There was something different in his voice, now not warmer, more alert. You want to defend the education. Let's test it. Everett. Reuben started. No, I'm curious. Strom leaned forward in his chair. Aldridge Capital is looking at a biotech acquisition, mid-stage company, gene editing platform. Our scientific advisors have given us a briefing, but none of us are scientists. He gestured around the table. Walk us through how CRISPR works, not the Wikipedia version, the actual mechanism. The room held its breath. Calla looked at him. She looked at the tray in her hands. She set it down on the service stand behind her, slowly, and then she turned back to the table. Are you asking me seriously? She said. I never ask things I'm not serious about. She folded her hands in front of her. She had reviewed enzyme kinetics that afternoon. She had spent 6 years before that learning to hold complexity in her mind the way some people hold music. Not as a list of facts, but as a living structure, one part illuminating another. She took a breath. CRISPR stands for Clustered Regularly Interspaced Short Palindromic Repeats, she began. The system your advisors are probably referring to uses 2 components, a guide RNA and a Cas9 protein. The guide RNA is the targeting mechanism. You design it to match a specific sequence in the genome, maybe 20 base pairs long. When the guide RNA finds its match, the Cas9 protein, which is essentially a molecular scissor, binds to the site and makes a double-strand break in the DNA. She paused. No one spoke. When that break happens, the cell's own repair machinery kicks in. You have 2 pathways, non-homologous end joining, which is fast and messy and usually disables the gene, useful if you want to knock something out, or homology-directed repair, which is slower and requires you to provide a template but lets you insert or correct a specific sequence. The precision of the edit depends on which pathway you're exploiting and how well you've designed your guide RNA. Strom was watching her. The rest of the table was watching her. For a gene editing platform at mid-stage acquisition, she continued, the questions your advisors should be asking are about off-target editing rates, whether the Cas9 is cutting anywhere it's not supposed to, and about delivery. Getting the CRISPR machinery into the right cells in a living human body is a completely different problem from making it work in a petri dish. Viral vectors, lipid nanoparticles, base editing alternatives. If they haven't addressed delivery, the platform isn't as far along as it looks on paper. She stopped. Strom sat back. The younger man, Whitfield, had his mouth very slightly open. Reuben had set down his fork. Where? Said a man at the far end of the table whom Calla didn't know, older, grey suit, with the measured stillness of someone who rarely needed to speak because things generally went the way he wanted them to. Did you say you studied? Columbia, Calla said. Class of, he left in my 4th year? The man nodded slowly. His name was Arthur Bain. He was, though Calla didn't know this, the founding partner of Aldridge Capital, a man who had spent 40 years identifying exactly 2 kinds of people, those who knew what they were talking about and those who did not. He had a particular sensitivity to the difference, the way some people have perfect pitch. The delivery question, he said. That's the thing our advisors didn't flag. They might have, she said carefully. I wouldn't know their briefing. They didn't, Bain said. He picked up his wine glass without drinking from it. What would you want to know about the lipid nanoparticle system specifically? Their biodistribution data, Calla said without hesitating, where the nanoparticles are accumulating in vivo. Liver uptake is a known issue. If they're presenting a systemic delivery claim, I'd want to see the tissue distribution in animal models, not just the efficacy results. Silence. Strom had not said anything for almost 3 minutes. This was, according to everyone at that table who knew him well, essentially unprecedented. He picked up his wine glass, set it down, looked at Calla with an expression that had shifted several times during the last 5 minutes and was still in the process of settling somewhere. He started. Correct, Bain said simply. That's correct. He looked at Strom. Everett, I think you should apologize to this woman. Strom looked at Bain. Then back at Calla. Something moved across his face that she couldn't quite read. Not embarrassment exactly, but something adjacent to it. A recognition, a recalibration. I made an assumption, Strom said finally. He said it without ornamentation, which surprised her more than anything else he had done that evening. I was wrong to. She had not expected that. Thank you, she said, because she didn't know what else to say, and because she had been raised by a woman who believed in acknowledging things when they were offered, sincerely. Whitfield let out a breath that had clearly been waiting a while. She was in the service corridor 20 minutes later, her tray under her arm, her heartbeat finally returning to something like normal, when Bain came through the door. She looked up, startled. Partners didn't usually come through the service door. He looked, she thought, like a man who made a habit of going through whichever doors were most direct. I want to ask you something, he said, without preamble, and you don't have to answer. All right, how far are you from finishing your degree? She looked at him for a moment. 1 year, roughly. I left at the end of my 3rd. And the circumstances that caused you to leave. Your mother, her dialysis is ongoing. It's manageable now. More manageable than it was. He nodded. He had the face of a man who was thinking several things at once and had learned to only show the surface of one of them. We retain a scientific advisory board for acquisitions. 3 people currently. All PhDs, all excellent. None of them said what you said tonight about the delivery mechanism. Calla waited. I'm not offering you a position, he said. I want to be clear about that. You don't have the credentials for the position I'm thinking about. I know, she said. But Aldridge has a history of sponsoring postgraduate education for exceptional candidates in relevant fields. It's a small program, not widely advertised. He reached into his jacket pocket and produced a card, heavy stock, simple font, a phone number, and an email. If you finish your degree and you're interested in the application process, call that number. The woman who answers will know who you are. Calla took the card. She looked at it for a moment. The weight of it. The texture. She thought about her mother in the dialysis chair at St. Luke's on Thursday mornings. She thought about her organic chemistry professor who had pulled her aside before she left and told her she was the most precise, analytical mind he'd taught in 15 years, which was generous of him and had not paid a single bill. Why? She said. Bain looked at her with something that might have been the closest he came to a smile. Because Everett Strom has been wrong about things before, and I've learned to pay attention to what those things turn out to be. He paused. Also, you were right about the biodistribution data. That's the question that's been bothering me since Tuesday. He went back through the door. She stood in the service corridor for a moment. The card in her hand, the sound of the dining room muffled through the wall. Then she put it in her apron pocket. carefully, next to the worn biochemistry textbook with its cracked spine and its margins full of her own notes in blue ink, and she picked up her tray and went back to work. The water glasses needed refilling. Some things didn't change, but some things, she was beginning to understand, were not as fixed as they had been made to look.